Good morning, everybody. I'm going to give folks another couple of minutes to get logged in before we get started.
Mr. Penley, it's Yana Cornish. Quick question. Do you usually record these or you're not planning on?
I try. It's a habit I haven't gotten great at getting into yet, but I do have this one already recording, and I will post it this afternoon.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, yes, I can see it on my screen now. Thanks.
And I think, like I've said before, I think our Zoom etiquette hasn't really caught up to us yet. And so I do realize that when I set a meeting for 9, people usually start clicking links at 9, and that means it takes us probably another 2 or 3 minutes to actually get logged in. So I hope y'all give me a little bit of grace as we give our last couple of folks a minute to join us before we get started. Ms. Hinger, are you on a device that if I make you a co-host, you could help me monitor the waiting room once we get started?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm going to keep our talk really informal, if that's okay with all of you. I guess I do want to give everybody a heads up first that I am recording for parents who aren't able to join us between 9 and 10 today. I'm going to post it later to our social media, and I'll include the recording in my my letter this weekend. And so as much as I usually ask people to turn videos on so that I can feel like I at least have somebody to see and know who I'm talking to, if you're uncomfortable with your video being posted to social media later, please feel free to go ahead and mute your video, and we'll work through it that way. To just give a quick update on where we are as a school, I felt like we had a really successful first week of online instruction. I completely recognize that it was only 3 days, but I think we were able to troubleshoot, solve problems as we went. We started on Tuesday with about a 91% attendance rate. So about 91% of the students who are currently enrolled at Clark Middle School showed up for that first day of class. By day 2, we had dipped by period into the 88 to 90 or 91 range. And then yesterday we took a dip and we were sitting at about 85% on average. I do think, especially compared to the spring where our attendance rates were in the 50% and lower, I'm really proud of that attendance rate, but the fact that we're already noticing a trend downward means that students sort of showed up to see what we were doing. Wanted to check things out, and then some of them are deciding that they want to do other things with their time. And that is one of the challenges of working in a virtual online space. One of the things I've talked to my teachers about is that we no longer have a captive audience. We have to absolutely design lessons that are engaging for all of our students if we want to keep their attention and keep them coming back. And so we're going to be working on that this week into next week, as well as making phone calls for all of our students that have not shown up for online instruction yet, or who have an odd pattern of attendance from this past week. Just a couple other quick updates. One, you may have noticed that your students came home talking not as much about content as you would want. We did dip our toe into the content in different subject groups this week, but a big part of our goals for the week were to introduce students to the new platform, to get them used to the tools that we were using. And whenever you have a highly complex tool, you sort of have to decrease the complexity of the content that you're teaching so that students can use the tool. Now that students have learned the tool, we're going to flop that. Students have some facility with the tool, so we're going to start increasing the complexity of the content that we engage kids with. So you should expect them to be doing a lot more in-depth math, ELA, social studies, and science going into next week. And then finally, I want to say how proud I am of your kids. They have really stuck with it. They have engaged with us. They have seemed like they really wanted to be here. They have worked hard in both their synchronous sessions and their asynchronous sessions, but their level of problem solving has been really amazing. I've seen students who on the first day of class, one of our teachers inadvertently opened up the wrong period of his class. And so students were not able to get there. One student accidentally went there, even though it was the wrong day. And so the teacher and the student were both there in the wrong classroom. And then so somehow that student then began texting out the address to the Zoom to all of the other students who were worried because they couldn't get into the class that they wanted. And there was one point where I clicked the link and it was clearly supposed to be a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class. All the kids were there, but it was the Tuesday class that was there. And I asked them, how did y'all figure out how to get here? And they were like, well, we've just been emailing and texting with each other to make sure that we got where we were supposed to go. And that's just one example of many that we've seen over the course of this week of kids really just problem solving the technology that we have. And it's been so nice to see. And I will say, I've been able to be in almost 10 full classes from beginning to end over the last 3 days, which is unheard of for me the first week of school. And kids are really engaging and doing good work in those classes. So I'm super proud of them. If there are 2 things that I can ask you for and encourage you to talk to your kids about right now, one is the video. I know that a lot of kids don't want to have their video on. And if we were to gather the data, I would say 8th grade has the lowest number of videos on, 7th grade is in the middle, 6th grade has the most number of videos on. And I completely understand if a kid has got bedhead that morning and they're not wanting to be in front of everybody. I don't always want my scraggly beard on the screen. We understand that, but at the same time, we also know there's a higher level of connection. Our teachers are able to do a lot more of that behind the scenes work of checking faces for understanding, of looking at body language to understand if they need to speed up or slow down. They're able to do that a lot more effectively when they see kids on the screen. And so if your kid is capable, if there's not a barrier to them turning on their video, like a technological barrier or something in the background because they're sharing space with somebody else, please encourage your kids to put their video on. And even if it's not the whole time, at least for the part of the lesson where the teacher is doing direct instruction. And then the second thing I'm going to ask you to encourage your kids to do is to stay for the asynchronous session if they need help. I've noticed this with my son particularly, as well as with a number of other students as I've been monitoring classes this week. The teachers are doing a good job of trying to give kids the opportunity to go out in the asynchronous portion and have some non-screen time. But if your child has questions, the teacher is staying there. And there's an opportunity for one-on-one help. There's an opportunity for small group help. And it doesn't always have to take the full 25 minutes of the asynchronous portion. A lot of times it's just a 5-minute, hey, Mr. Martin, can you clarify how you did that math problem for me? Mr. Martin does it one more time and the kid goes, oh, I think I got it now. Now I can go do my classwork. But please encourage them if they're leaving the synchronous portion of the lesson feeling like they didn't completely understand what was taught. Our teachers are staying in the Zoom classrooms to help any student who needs assistance. Right up until about the 50-minute mark of the lesson, that's when they're closing out the Zoom so they can open up their next classroom. So that was really all of the updates that I've got right now. I do feel like it's been a successful week, both instructionally and logistically. I appreciate everything that our parent community has done to support kids. I know a lot of parents took Tuesday off to make sure their kids got started. I've seen lots of Facebook and Instagram posts of the learning spaces you've set up for your kids at home, and I appreciate all of that. It's going to help us all be successful. But at this point, I thought I'd stop and just, if you feel like you have a question, you can go over into the participant window and you can raise your hand and I'll be happy to call on people. You're also welcome to type questions into the chat. Ms. Hinger, hopefully you can help me monitor that as well, and I'll answer any questions you have, or if you have concerns that you'd like me to address. And even if I'm not able to address them, I'll at least know that they're concerns and be ready to take it back to my admin and my leadership team if I don't have a response for you this morning. I've said before, I'm really good at wait time, y'all. And I've seen you on Facebook, I've seen you in board meetings. I know you got things to say.
Hello. I'm just wanting to know about Friday, like trying to schedule maybe something extracurricular in the morning, how much of a problem that would be?
It would not be a problem whatsoever. So currently, and this is district-wide across middle and high school, so all of secondary schools, Friday is an asynchronous instruction day. So I sent out a message to all of our students this morning reminding them, Teachers should have reminded them of that yesterday, that they would not be joining their live Zoom classes today, but they would have assignments to do in Google Classroom. The bottom line is that Friday is 20% of our instructional time, and we can't afford to lose it altogether. So we do need to move students forward on Fridays. That being said, if your kid wants to do a Friday morning swim class or a Friday morning play date and do their Google Classroom activities in the afternoon, that should not be a problem whatsoever. That's sort of the purpose of having it as asynchronous time.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Knight in the chat has asked if the after school program is still going to be run. It will be run. It will be digital, so it's not going to be face-to-face. And it will be, and forgive me, the date has just flown out of my mind. I believe we are looking at a start date of the 28th. Ms. Singer, is that right?
That's correct.
And so, Ms. Singer, do you want to add anything since that's one of your programs?
Sure. We will have more information coming out in Mr. Penley's emails next week. It starts the 28th. It's going to be from 4:30 until 6, and it's going to be a mix of enrichment type activities as well as homework help. And we're also going to have some collaboration with the University of Georgia with their counseling department bi-weekly. So I think it'll be engaging if your kid's looking for another way to connect. Mr. Penley should send out registration next week, as well as more information about the program. We do ask that people consistently attend at least 3 out of 4 days each week. So if it's something you think your kid is interested in and they're going to consistently attend, then you should sign up. We do have limited spots. Our spots are between 35 and 45. Thank you.
And if you are interested in your child having some extracurricular after school activities, but not necessarily participating in the 3 days a week that there's required to do as part of the after school program, around the same time, those last weeks of September moving into October, we are going to start with some of our other extracurricular offerings, things like FFA, Math Count, Science and Energy Team. We do have, I'm actually a little bit surprised. We have a lot of teachers asking what they can do after school. And I'm like, whatever you want. If there's at least 2 kids that want to do it with you and you're interested in doing it, just do it. And so I like to think that we'll have some additional enrichment opportunities coming up that may not require the same commitment that ASP would require.
Mr. Penley, a parent asked about the Science and Energy Team. That will start on the 28th, the week of the 28th as well. Ms. Hughes is doing that as part of our 21st Century program. So if you're interested in that, I encourage you to sign up for 21st Century.
And I believe she's still taking the applications, and so she's going to be reviewing those over this next week. I'll ask her when she'd like to close the application period so that I can share that information. And then because of the limited spaces, she may very well have to select students and not be able to accept everybody. If we do have overwhelming interest, and I'll say, sort of like Clark Scholars is a program that we have grown a lot of interest in here. Ms. Hughes came to us from Hillsman, and she's been doing the Science and Energy Team for quite a while. They are award-winning at the local, state, and national level. She is very good at it. And so I see it being another one of those things like Clark Scholars that is really going to grow and be a big part of our program. But she is trying to start just a little bit small this year. Ms. York has asked, they're new to CMS, you've got a 6th grader, who do we contact if your child has a doctor's appointment, orthodontist appointment, is just sick, not feeling like participating in their classes? The easiest thing to do is to email your child's advisor, and that should be on their schedule. If you have a formal excuse note from a doctor or another healthcare provider, and you can snap a picture of it or scan it and send it so that we can put it in their attendance file, we ask that you do that. If you can't, you can just give us the information in an email. Your child's advisor will forward that to our attendance clerk, and she'll make sure that attendance gets cleaned up. Sometimes it's about 24 hours, so you may notice that you get the attendance call that day. You may notice that it shows up as an unexcused absence that day. Know that that gets forwarded to our clerk, and then within 24 hours, it gets converted to an excused attendance.
Mr. Penley, there's a question about how we address discipline issues.
We're still feeling that out right now. We started with just overall classroom management with teachers. We do have an office referral process. We do expect students to follow the code of conduct. And at this point, I've not gotten any referrals. I guess I need to check that form and make sure there weren't any today, but we will be handling discipline issues. And it's sort of like any year, the first couple of days of school, everybody's on their best behavior, and we don't typically have a lot of discipline issues. By the time we hit the end of week 2 is when we start seeing who's, tired of their best behavior and their best manners and are starting to do some of those things. And so we do have processes in place. both at the classroom level in terms of using the waiting room, in using co-teachers, in using some other resources that we can point students to if they're having a hard time staying focused on the lesson and they're turning into a distraction to others. At this point, I am only aware of, I want to say, 3 significant disruptions to our Zoom classrooms in this past week. I believe 2 of them were in 6th grade and 1 of them was in 7th grade. All of them we're aware of, and we have either a behavior specialist or a member of the administrative team is working with the family and the student in particular to try to figure out a resolution. Ultimately, we are a school moving into year 3 of restorative practices. We've learned how to do restorative circles through online platforms, and so our first attempt at working with students, and this may be a little bit different for our 6th graders who are not used to this, will be to sit down, to circle up, to identify what the problem is, see if we can figure out how to make it right, and make a plan for making sure it doesn't happen in the future. If it does continue to happen in the future after we've made a plan and committed to it, then we do sometimes move into punitive consequences. I'm a little at a loss right now for the different consequences that I have to impose on students in a digital realm. And so that's why we're sort of seeing what this first couple of weeks look like, and then we're gonna go back and revise our discipline practices. Mr. Miller?
All right. Hey, how's it going? I was a few minutes late checking in, so you may have covered this in the very beginning, but I was just curious how teachers are doing with all this. I know that there's a ton of preparation, and I've been just incredibly impressed with all of the work and the organization and the communication. And I was just curious kind of what your take is from the teachers this first week.
It's a weird thing to take the pulse. So Miss Hinger and Miss VW and I think I've got a couple of other staff members. So our teachers are actually in professional learning right now, trying to rethink how we're dealing with Fridays, because as we reviewed lesson plans, we were like, are we really using this 20% of our time as best as we can? And they're overwhelmed. I'm not gonna lie. Teachers are overwhelmed. It's new to all of us. I know that you are overwhelmed too. So we're trying to put on our happy faces and say we're not overwhelmed. It's all good. We've got it. We're confident. But there is a level of overwhelmedness among our teachers. What's balancing that out right now is their absolute joy in seeing children. It's been 6 months since we've seen our kids, and so this is what we do for a living. We choose to do it, and we've been taken away from the ability to do it. And so I think the overwhelmed is being balanced out by the joy in the way that our kids have engaged with us. That being said, y'all have to know I'm going to push our teachers really hard this year. One of the things that I've been reflecting on the last couple of days is that we have managed, I feel like, to start the year competently. Like, we are providing adequate instruction given the situation that we're in, and that's not enough. We have achievement that needs to increase. We have gaps that need to close. And so now that we have proven that we can do this, that we can provide meaningful instruction in a digital environment, we can't treat it as just a stopgap. We're going to have to start moving more towards how are we improving outcomes for our students. And that is going to mean that teachers are going to continue to be a little bit overwhelmed. But I think at Clark Middle, we've created the culture that's why we're here. And so even though we do find places where we're sort of spinning and feeling overwhelmed, we have systems in place to help teachers with that, places where they can go. If there's anything that, if you are thinking you want to do anything to support our teachers right now, the biggest thing you can do is send a email of gratitude, something that acknowledges the work that they've done. I've gotten somewhere between 10 and 20 from parents recently. I've been forwarding those out to the teams that they apply to, but a quick email to your child's advisor that just says, hey, our kid had a great week. I heard laughter, I heard engagement, and I feel like they were learning stuff this week would absolutely go a long way towards decreasing some of that anxiety that our teachers have. Because ultimately, they want to do a good job. And right now, they're just scared because they're not sure if they know how to do this job, because we've just learned how to do it. And so if you could give them some feedback saying, yeah, you've hit the mark, or you're close to the mark, or at least it's a good work in progress, I think that would go a long way.
Well, you answered my second follow-up question, was what we could do, but I'll just say on this call, because I know we got a few teachers here that our daughter she has loved this week. She has said, I love school. This has been so awesome. She's been excited to share what's going on. She's excited about the format. I was talking to neighbors the other day about how excited I was about how Clark Middle has done. You guys are just incredible. And so you'll get a note too, but for right now, just know that we really appreciate all the hard work.
Thank you. And our teachers have really attacked this with a problem-solving attitude. And so I'm proud of the work that we've done as a school. I don't want anyone to think that I'm going to be complacent, though, and that the way that we're doing it right now is going to be good enough to move us the way that we need to move this year. But I think we've proven that we can do it, and we're ready to start refocusing on, okay, so now that we can do this, what's our next step? The other thing, I guess, if you're asking ways to be more involved and to support our teachers, Sandy, you can tell me if we are still in need of this. I think that we are. Our PTA really does amazing things to support teachers over the course of the year. They make sure that even during those busy times where the majority of our parents can't necessarily express their appreciation in tangible ways, that our teachers feel the love from our parent community through lots of teacher appreciation. And I think we still need some PTA officers. Is that right?
That is correct.
And so we do have our first PTA meeting next Tuesday. It'll be at 6 o'clock. I'll send out a link sometime soon. And so if you are interested in stepping up and being a part of that group, that is another way to support our teachers. We need both a vice president, a treasurer, and a secretary. Are there other questions? Mr. Miller's asked a plan for substitutes, and I made a decision that I may regret as we move forward, but we'll find out, I guess. The complexity of navigating the online systems that we have to use to make classwork every day is overwhelming for a trained teacher who spent 6 weeks preparing for it. And so I'm hesitant to bring substitutes into the picture. What we have chosen to do is all of our teachers have made 5 days worth of asynchronous emergency subplans. So emergency means a teacher is in the hospital, a teacher has had a personal issue and they cannot even get to a computer, like they are unable to try to create anything for kids. Those are shared with the admin team and with team leaders, and so we're able to deploy those through Google Classroom. We're usually able to post somebody up in the teacher's Zoom as students arrive to say, hey, your teacher's sick today, but they've posted your lessons for you. Sometimes that includes video or media or other direct instruction activities, and then students would work asynchronously. In the case of non-emergency, so I have to schedule my 6-month dentist appointment in 2 weeks. Teachers are also going to prepare asynchronous subplans, but instead of being emergency, that would probably be a lot of review or less complicated work. It would be more aligned with what the students would have been learning that day anyway. While y'all are thinking of other questions, if you are in a place where you can open up the participant window and use the buttons, there should be a go slower and a go faster button. One is gray and one is blue. Can you just give me some feedback on the screen time? So if you would click go faster, if you're like the screen time's all right, we're not having any issues with it. Our kids could probably do a couple more minutes if they really needed to. And then it goes slower if you'll click that if you feel like your kids are spending too much time in front of their screens right now. And if you don't want to vote, that's fine too. This is such an interesting concept, and I'm honestly struggling with it just a little bit in terms of the amount of screen time. I know that before school started, and I'm an educator, and everybody, I can't believe I'm about to say this in front of the people whose kids I'm educating. I checked my kid's PS4 account occasionally and found out that he would be in front of his PS4 for 6 to 8 hours in a day over the summer and during quarantine. And so I know that he has the capacity to do it. It doesn't have any negative physical effect on him that day. He's still able to go swimming or ride his bike with his friends and do all that sort of stuff. And so it seems like I know that he can engage. And And I'm also looking at some of our classrooms where it feels like the teachers just hit their stride at minute 29 and they're like, you know what, we could, and the kids are engaged and there's still conversation going. It's not just talking at kids. And they're sort of asking, do I have a little bit of flexibility to go 10 minutes more if I really need to, and then dismiss? And what I'm telling teachers right now is they've worked really hard to learn how to engage kids and that I'm going to trust them. And if they feel like their class is engaged, if they have signs that say kids are working hard, that they're not fatigued, that they don't need that extra break and they need to go an extra 5 minutes or an extra 10 minutes, I've given them that flexibility to do so. But I've also said if you've got a day where you spend a longer portion of time on Monday doing synchronous instruction because you're introducing a new concept and you want to pull that back and maybe just do 25 minutes of synchronous and more work session asynchronous time on Tuesday, we're trying to give teachers the professional flexibility to make the decisions within their content based on what they know their kids need with those things. But it is, I'm gonna be asking for that type of feedback a lot over these next couple of weeks about the screen time versus the not screen time. I'm just scrolling through. I got behind on the chat, so forgive me. As far as, so Mr. Miller's followed up about the contract with ESS. My understanding is that the district is still contracted with ESS. There are other building leaders who have felt differently about substitutes' capacity to fill in a substitute manner. I think especially with our primary aged kids, the PKK 1 and 2, there's a lot more need for that daily time with the teacher. And so I think that they are working a little bit harder with substitutes at buildings. And I'll just be honest, the substitute situation in Clark County when we were in person was pretty challenging. There's the word that's politically correct. Like we would have maybe, if we would have 8 teachers out on a day, we would maybe have 2 substitutes in the building. And so we got really used to problem solving creatively. Our elementary schools don't really have that problem. And y'all all have middle school children. So if you're an adult and you get to choose between working with a 6-year-old and working with a 12-year-old, you're probably going to choose the 6-year-old because 12-year-olds have some tendencies that not every adult can appreciate the way that those of us who work in middle schools do. And so they have tighter relationships with some of their subs where they've been able to bring them into some of their pre-planning, and so they're probably a little better prepared. I think that contract holistically is staying the same for the time being. I am seeing some comments talking about the benefit of that 15 minutes. I absolutely 100% agree. I think the thing we have to keep in mind is our teachers haven't planned it as complete break time. They've planned it as break from being live on a screen. And so that is where students are doing the work that is supposed to help solidify their understanding of the content that day. So for example, if we learn about finding the circumference of a circle using the radius or the diameter, was what my son was working on last night, the asynchronous portion of their lesson was a problem set that they were supposed to do. And so if a student goes and uses that as total break time, that means that work then moves to somewhere later in the day because it is still learning that they need to do.
Mr. Penley, you have a question for Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo all the comments about sort of how well we feel like the teachers are doing right now. My question really is kind of a big picture question related to that. I feel like you guys have probably been able to, you've had more time to prepare since they delayed the start date for school. And I was just wondering if you could give a couple of examples of things that you were able to do during that time period, things that you came up with because you had the extra time to prepare, just so that we have a better appreciation of the kind of work that went into getting ready for this week. And again, I echo all of the words of appreciation, how great we feel about the week so far, and thank you.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I love the opportunity to answer it. So the biggest thing, I guess the 2 biggest things, maybe Ms. Hinger and Ms. VW can help me decide which one is the biggest. The 2 biggest things for me was the 6-week time allowed us enough time to learn and play with and tinker with the vast number of tools that we have to work with, and then not just know how to use them, but develop a level of school-wide consistency. so that if your kid is going from first period to third period, on the parent end and the student end, the experience is pretty seamless because there's enough consistency there with the strategies that are being used, the tools that are being used, and the communication that we've been doing. If we had tried to do all that in a week, and I'll be honest, like if we hadn't pushed the start back, we would have made it. But all of the errors that we made in week 2 of pre-planning, all of the times where the login didn't work, or the tool fell flat, or we couldn't figure out how to make the screens work in the right way, your kids would have been part of that. They would have experienced it. And ultimately it may have turned them off because they would have been like, this is a circus and we don't want to be a part of it. We expect better. And I'll be honest, our middle schoolers hold us accountable for doing good things. So that was one thing. The other huge thing that it allowed us to do was practice. And so, and you may see some of this in board meetings and things because it grew from Clark Middle, and I got to give Miss Lurch Batson, our assistant principal, all the credit for it. In week 1, we said, hey, we can't have teachers getting in front of kids and doing this thing they've never done before for the first time in front of kids. That's their audience. You don't do the play, and you don't do the dress rehearsal in front of your audience. And so we practiced, I want to say 5 different times we had teaching rounds. And so teachers taught their lesson using their digital tools to a classroom of their colleagues who gave them direct and immediate feedback on different elements of the lesson. That was a huge amount of time we had to spend. It was 5 half days that we did, but ultimately our teachers came out saying, having done it, I now know blank, 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 and blank about how I need to do it differently. And then in addition, they got feedback from their peers saying, here's something you might consider when you run into that problem of blank, or here's something you might consider because I found myself checking out a little bit because I was tired of hearing your voice all the time. And so that was the second big thing. The other things that it allowed us to do, it allowed us to create systems for tracking data and attendance. It allowed us to really, and I started really lightly because I felt like if we jumped straight into the digital tools, then we would forget who we were teaching. And so having that extra time also allowed us to spend our first couple of days reminding ourselves who adolescents are and what they need, because I am a big believer that adolescence is a very specific point of development in a child's life that requires very specific strategies, instruction, accountability, and we needed to ground ourselves in that before we started trying to develop lessons. So those were really the big overarching things. To any of the employees, and I'm sorry I couldn't have teachers here today. Again, they're working right now trying to make sure that next week is better than this week, or they would have joined us. Ms. Hinger, Ms. Mullins, Ms. VW, do any of y'all want to weigh in on how you felt like the extra time helped us?
I was able to see it from both sides. So I was able to see the tools that our teachers were learning. They had 3 weeks of 4 hours a day of digital learning where they were basically participating in online learning that was developed specifically for our school district and our teachers to learn tools that they were going to use with our students. And so as of yesterday, my daughter, who's a 6th grader, one of those tools, actually both of my daughters, I also have a high school student, and both of them came back and talked about one of the tools that our teachers learned in that digital learning module, in those modules, how much my personal children enjoyed engaging with those tools and how it helped them learn. And so I think that time was definitely beneficial for our teachers to prepare that. We also prepared, as Mr. Penley said, a lot of systems, created the entire digital learning website so that, we would have, the nice thing about the drawback with Google Classroom as a digital learning management system is that it doesn't really have a good parent piece. And so we wanted to create that so that parents would have access to the things that they need. So those are some of the things that I think were important, and seeing it as a parent and as a teacher.
And I'll highlight those systems too. One of the things I'm most proud of is our scheduling system. Y'all have to know, scheduling an 800-kid middle school with the level of special program needs that we have is sort of like a house of cards. And you change any one thing and all of a sudden the thing crumbles. And we do that work over the summer well in advance. So we were scheduling for this school year in May of last year. And there was a point, I want to say about mid-July, that I had to walk into the scheduling team. It was the last vestiges of when we were still meeting in person and say, you've got to scrap everything that you've done and start over again. And I'm sorry. And they did that. They did it without any issue. They were able to come up with solutions to all of the problems that came along with digital instruction. And then in addition, we were able to come up with what I felt like was a really seamless distribution strategy for student schedules, where we were able to email schedules out to all of our students. Those schedules had direct links to their classrooms, so we made it just as foolproof. Like, I'm trying to find the right word because I don't want to feel like I'm calling middle schoolers fools. Like, just made it as easy as possible for students to log in, because we knew if it was click here and then here and then here and then here, somewhere between click 1 and click 4, we were going to lose 5 or 6 kids in each class. We wanted it to be one click and you're in your class. And that did take a little bit of time to build that structure. Again, I've got to give a lot of credit to our assistant principal, Miss Lurch-Batts, and she brought her Google wizardry skills and spreadsheet skills to that, that really allowed us to build a complicated system within a more complicated system that ultimately was geared towards making things as simple as possible for kids and parents.
I do want to add, hi everyone, I'm Miss Mullins, one of the counselors. I appreciate our administration so much for really thinking through every kind of possibility that could happen. And I think that time that we have for pre-planning really allowed us the opportunity to do this with fidelity and to plan really, really well for your students. I've lived in Texas and California, and my educator friends have, and they're freaking out, and so I feel like we were so lucky. I also feel like we have an incredible principal who has shown amazing leadership and has advocated for teachers and for students and has really pushed us in a positive way to become better and to really take this impossible situation and make it possible for our students. So I think it has so much to do with the hard work of Ms. Hanger and the online website that she created, and our teachers who have worked effortlessly and just hours and hours of planning. Our admin team, Ms. VW, everybody has really come together as a Clark family to make this as positive of an experience for your students as possible. And I think that the first week, I am very impressed with our faculty at how well it went.
I guess 2 things that I want to sort of add is, one, the other unintended positive consequence that's going to come out of this, and I don't want to be Pollyanna and I don't want to paint too rosy of a picture, but teachers have to plan with a level of precision and intention for online learning that I don't think we were doing in person. I think we were relying a lot on our and if you ever go to an education conference, they talk about your toolbox or your tool belt all the time, so much that you want to throw up every time they say it. But they have this set of tools that they're able to deploy in the moment, and they really rely on that in the moment tool set. Right now, we're having to plan for every minute of instruction. And the classrooms I'm honestly seeing better alignment to the content, better strategies aligned to the learning goals, better formative assessment aligned to what kids did. And so I think we're going to come out with stronger planning. And while I've shared it with some of my leadership, I haven't yet shared it with teachers that we're going to try to capitalize on that for as long as we are in distance learning. Because again, this can't be a stopgap. Teachers have to grow through this. Students have to grow through this. We can't just be content and say, hey, it's okay. There was another thing I was going to say, and I can't remember what it was now.
Mr. Penley, there's a question from Miss Green about grading. I think it might be something good to address.
So we're trying to give teachers, I'm sorry, the question is, I forgot everybody can't read the chat window. Regarding parent portal assignments that are due today, will they be marked complete when they are turned in? No, we're trying to give teachers, and I can't remember now that I'm saying that we had all this consistency, the number has just flown out of my mind. We do expect teachers to enter and post 1 grade or 2 grades each week. They do have a little bit of, it does take time to grade an assignment. If you're an ELA teacher, it's probably hardest for you because you've got to read student essays. But we do give them a couple of days of a window to get those entered into Campus. If you want to see them marked as complete, you're a lot more likely to see that through Google Classroom. I have my girls have moved on, and I actually need to sign up for it for my son right now. But I used to get the weekly Google Classroom update sent directly to my email, and it said your child has these missing assignments. And that's really an easier way to keep up with what has and hasn't been turned in, especially while you're in that couple of day window waiting for the grades to be posted. So the short answer, sorry, I've really got to work on this. The short answer is you should expect 2 grades to be posted for each week of instruction. Teachers have 3 or 4 days after the assignment is due to actually get it graded and the grade posted in Campus. The other thing I was going to say was so cool. I just can't remember what it was.
Hey, Penley, while you're thinking of that, can I say something about Google Classroom as well?
Sure.
You may want to also sit with your child. I did this morning. I talked with my daughter about checking her email regularly and how each day she should clean out her email and be ready for the next day. Like Mr. Penley sent out an update to students this morning, so I made sure that she actually read that email, and then also go to her Google Classroom, especially on Friday. It's a good day to do that, and click through each class. And you may want to watch them do it just so you can see, they're looking to see if they have any assignments that are due in the Google Classroom, and then looking for asynchronous assignments today. So it could be a good Friday morning practice for you to do with your student. And I think it's important that, you know, in the olden days, we didn't send a textbook for a parent and a textbook for a student, but, you know, the kid would sit down with their parent or guardian with the textbook. So I think you kind of have to think of Google Classroom that way as well.
And Ms. Singer, are you able to answer Ms. Weaver's question in the chat too? How do we sign up for the Google Classroom weekly report?
Yes, let me make sure I know how to do that. I think on the teacher's end, they have to enable that. And then I think an email comes out to the parent. And we had all of our teachers email that. So let me double check on that on my end.
Okay, while we're looking for that, Ms. Capuzzo, did you have a question?
Yes, sorry, I don't know if you can hear me. Regarding Ms. Hinger's comment about emails, I was going through that with Basil the other day, and it felt very overwhelming. And maybe it was just the start of the year, but it was like each teacher had emailed maybe half a dozen times, with every email going to a link that went to a link that went to the website. And so I wondered, like, which ones were worth saving. I didn't know which emails pertained directly to an assignment or pertained to the website that also had the assignment. So I wondered how to decipher which ones are redundant and can be erased.
And that's a really good point. And we noticed, I actually noticed that sitting with my son the night before school started, and he got a flood of about 40 Google Classroom notifications. And so we've been working with teachers on developing better norms and consistency on which things. So Google Classroom is set up so basically anytime a teacher does anything, it sends students a notification. We're working with teachers on changing their settings so that that doesn't happen. It only happens with the most important thing. And then on the student side, during advisement next week, we're going to teach them and some of our content teachers already went ahead and did it as a stopgap, but we're going to teach it to everybody through advisement next week, students how to manage their notifications in Google Classroom. I think we've identified that Google Classroom we think is the root cause. And so we're going to try to solve it through Google Classroom. And then after next week, if we still notice that having fixed the Google Classroom issue, both on the student and the teacher end, that students are still getting an overwhelming number of communications, then we'll come back and problem solve again. But right now we think it's Google Classroom. And I think if teachers adjust their settings, students adjust their settings, it should narrow it down quite a bit.
Okay, thanks.
The other thing that we've tried to work real hard with teachers on is making sure, and this is just a teacher habit because we like to have ourselves ready on Sunday night for Monday morning, is teachers often will sit down on Sunday and post everything, and then all of a sudden everything for the week is there at the same time. We've taught them how to schedule those posts so that it shows up actually when the students are going to be in class.
Mr. Penley, I have an answer on the Google Classroom thing. I thought this was the answer, but I wanted to make sure. So our teachers should have all turned on parent notification in their Google Classrooms. Probably you haven't gotten it yet because it's Friday. That email usually comes out Friday afternoon around 4 o'clock. And you'll have to accept saying, yes, I want to receive these emails. And then you should receive that email each Friday afternoon. That'll be a summary from the Google Classroom. Mr. Batson made a video, and I think it was posted in some of the classes for kids about how to turn off their notifications in their Google Classroom. And so I think my daughter must have seen that email and turned hers off. So it was much cleaner after she turned off the notifications in Google Classroom.
And I will, Mr. Batson, has a really easy to follow set of instructions for kids. So if you're interested in going ahead and doing that with your kid over the weekend so that they get a good fresh start with their email going into the next week, I don't have the right permissions to share it with you right now, but I'll ask Mr. Batson if it's okay, and I'll include it in my letter this weekend, and I'll post it to Facebook as well for anybody who wants to walk their kids through it.
Oh, and one more thing. I would just say for assignments, just to really focus on following the assignments in the Google Classroom, not really paying attention. If you don't get that setting turned off in email, I would just, focus on the Google Classroom assignments within Google Classroom and not so much during the email. Most of the emails your child gets will probably be some kind of follow-up to an email they sent, or maybe an overall email from me or from Mr. Penley about, something for all students.
We have another question in the chat. How can parents see feedback from students' work? Does it get graded and sent back so kids can see what they did wrong? And that varies by content and what the assignment might be. So for a smaller assignment like a homework assignment that's mostly review, it's probably going to get graded and entered into the grade book, but there's not necessarily going to be qualitative feedback. For something like a writing assignment, yes, students will probably get feedback directly in their document through Google Classroom. And then the grade will also go into the grade book and be posted in the Google Classroom. And then for anything that's somewhere in the middle, that would be up to teacher discretion, whether they feel like feedback is going to improve students' performance next time, or whether they just want to give a grade to say, hey, here's the amount of this material you've mastered at this point. It's so funny that parents say that if it comes from a teacher or an advisor, it carries a lot more weight. And we're over here at the school saying, when a parent says it or an older sibling says it, it carries a lot more weight. So we're all sort of counting on the other to make all that happen. It is weird. That's one of those things about middle school that I love. We've got some kids who you can say whatever you want to them at home and they are going to completely ignore you. But the minute that Miss Hinger says it, all of a sudden it's like gospel truth. And then we have some other kids who are like, we don't care what y'all say here. My mama's the only one who can tell me anything. And that's a little like my kid is sometimes. And so it's just weird how it goes back and forth at this age level. Are there other questions or major concerns, things you want us thinking forward to? Again, I'm monitoring the numbers. I'm on the district's cross-functional team that is planning our re-entry strategy to face-to-face instruction. I don't like saying that out loud because it feels like a super big responsibility. But at this point, I don't see middle school coming back until January at the earliest. And that's why when you hear me say things like we can't be content with just a stopgap, it's because that's where my mind is, that a whole semester of online instruction can't just be adequate. It has to move us forward. Right now we're at adequate. I think that given another couple of weeks with my faculty to test out the things that we're doing, to find the strategies that really hit home and the ones that fall a little bit flat, to really engage with our content a little bit more fully in the next week, we can start making those moves for school improvement and not just being adequate at online instruction.
Mr. Penley,
sorry, did you want to say something?
Oh, so I think you have a hand up.
Oh, sorry. Ms. Capuzzo, is that another question or is that left over from the last one?
That's left over, sorry.
No
I don't
problem.
know how to do this.
There you go, I got it. And I also think it's important to point out what Ms. Hinger's point in the chat, that a lot of the skills that we're being forced to teach in terms of organization, time management, technological skills, email, inbox management, communication, those are all things that are going to ultimately serve our kids well. It's just figuring out how we teach all of that and also teaching reading, writing, mathematics, science, and social studies at the same time. And just know the thing that wakes me up at 2 o'clock in the morning every night is the number of instructional hours that we've lost. As much as I think we gained a lot from that 6 weeks of pre-planning that we had, it's still 6 weeks of instruction that we lost. We're still going to lose time for testing and assessment. I really hope that by the time we get to the spring that we have a different answer from the State Department of Education on standardized testing in the spring. But if we don't, that's another 10 days we're going to lose. And so there is an urgency to content instruction in my brain that you're going to start seeing play out in your students' classrooms over the next couple of weeks. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I know that it's too early to tell in terms of the data yet, but I know one of the concerns kind of going into the school year and being virtual was attendance and kids that essentially could just not log in, or they could log in and log back off, or not turn their cameras on and not engaged. And I was just curious, not in any way trying to add additional work, but if there is any kind of way in which you guys as a school or the district is trying to capture that data along engagement to kind of see, like, with attendance, with engagement, you know, just kind of having a sense of how well this is going from that data point.
Yeah, and we have sort of a 2-track system for doing that right now. To me, the first measure of success is just flat out our kids logging in, because we can't really do anything else unless we know that kids are logging in. And so we are, and I'll share my screen just a minute because I don't think I've got, I'm just going to double check, real check, make sure I don't have any FERPA violations on my screen. So this is sort of an example of what we do daily. And you should be seeing just some numbers in some columns in a spreadsheet. If you look at columns K through N, this is aggregating all of the data that's over on the left side that I don't have on the screen because I'm not allowed to share it with you. You'll see at the bottom the tabs. We've done this every day. And so usually attendance is done just by day, because once the bus drops you off here, the assumption is that you stayed here, and our elements of skipping are pretty low at the middle school level. But now that kids can choose to go to second period and not go to third period, we're tracking attendance by period. And so you can see here that our day 3 attendance, we started in the 90s on day 1, we stayed in the 90s on day 2, day 3 we dropped into the 70s down here and the 80s, and so we're tracking it by period every day. The other really important piece for me, and I'm not going to click on the tab because it would be a violation of privacy, we're tracking the attendance by address as well. And so we're looking to see if we have pods or communities that are struggling to log in. And then right now, what our teachers did this morning in their team meetings is I shared this information in a different spreadsheet, and I'm afraid to pull it up because I'm not sure if I've got unshareable information on it. They're identifying students in their advisements who either have not shown up at all for school or who have a spotty pattern of attendance, and we're making phone calls between now and Tuesday to find out what the barriers are. If the barrier is technology, we're going to Ms. Hinger, we're seeing if we can solve it. If the barrier is access to internet, I'm advocating with the district for the resources that they're trying to deploy. That is a big hiccup right now, is we do not have broadband access for all. And I don't want to say too many things about that because I feel like I would start saying things that might get me in trouble. But right now, we have solutions for the majority of our communities where we are noticing a lack of internet connectivity. A couple of places that we're falling short are the Atlanta Highway Corridor. We know we've got some neighborhoods there that lack internet access for large groups of kids, but we don't have a solution in place either through Athens Housing Authority, through one of the district's Wi-Fi buses. And so part of our problem solving will be figuring out how to get those kids logged in. As far as and so we're doing this daily at the admin level, weekly at the teacher level to make phone calls to track down kids who are not here. As far as the engagement portion of things go, I'm relying a lot on the observations that we're doing. So having the additional assistant principal and an additional instructional coach. So there are really 5 of us plus our special ed team leader doing observations each day. We're seeing almost every classroom over the course of about a 3-day cycle. And we're using that information to guide where we feel like we are with engagement. And then we're also using teacher responses. The one thing I'll say about the cameras is it's really funny. It's easier for me when I can see you, but I've been in classes that's completely dark, every screen off except the teachers, and they're all still, they're raising their hands, they're contributing verbally, they're typing into the chat window, they're going into the breakout rooms, they're still doing all the things. So this is one of those times where I'm just trying to decide for myself, is this just a technology gap and my 40-year-old self can't understand the perception of a 12-year-old? And maybe we just need to back away and not worry so much about it, or if it really is something that we need to address. Going forward, I'd like to find a better metric for engagement, but it's such a vague thing that I'm having trouble coming up with what the quantitative data point would be for it. And y'all, if you're asking what you can do to support schools right now, if there's a vote, if there's a candidate who's advocating for broadband as a public utility, advocating for broadband for all. If that had been in place before we started this, so many of the problems we've had to work to solve would have already been solved. And we would be able to say that we were providing online instruction with a much higher level of equity if there were broadband for all in Athens, Georgia. And I think, I like to think that's a problem that as a fluent town as we are, that we should be able to solve that problem. Sorry, I'll come down from my soapbox now. I apologize. I'm going to work on the brevity. I'm sorry. I don't get to teach kids anymore, and so this is like my time to talk. Miss Weaver, I feel the exact same way. And I try not to use the word lazy too much, but our kids are going to realize that I honestly think it's harder. Like, there is more work for them to do. It takes more concentration, more engagement, more intentionality on their part too, to do well in lessons. So I think they're going to come out having had a higher level of rigor once this is all said and done, but it is going to be a challenge to begin with, because a lot of our kids are used to teachers, like, I hate using the word spoon feed, but we've been spoon feeding and hand holding and doing a lot of support, and some of that support is not available anymore. And so kids are going to have to step up. And so about 5 minutes left. I'm going to start wrapping us up. I'm happy to stay for any additional questions, or if you have sort of individual things or grade level or team level questions you'd like to ask, you're welcome to hang out. I will again give a save the date. Next Tuesday at 6 will be our first PTA meeting. I believe we are going to discuss the organization of PTA at the middle school, how we work on a committee structure, which makes things really, in my mind, having had a lot of kids come through elementary PTA want a lot. They want you to do and volunteer and do some more and volunteer some more. We have a really streamlined system where you get to pick the thing you feel like you're really good at. There's really 2 or 3 major initiatives over the whole year within that category, and as long as you do those things, you're good. So it's really a much lower level of intensity, so please feel free to join us. Again, if you're interested in being on our leadership team, it's also a good way to start being known at our school. I hate saying it this way, but I see our PTA leaders a lot more frequently than I see some of our other parents, and that's just a way to be connected. The other thing I'll say is look for the rigor to increase over the next couple of days. I'm absolutely serious when I say that I'm having anxiety like I can't believe about the lack of instructional time that we have, and so I'm going to be pushing our teachers hard to start moving more deeply into content than they have this week. I think it was appropriate to start the week slowly, to orient to new tools and new platforms, to let all of us practice with these things, but we've got to hit content hard going forward. So I'll hang out. Thanks so much for joining us. I love having 27 people. I can think back a couple of years and having just 3 or 4 people show up. So maybe this is another good positive unintended consequence, that it's easier for parents to be engaged at the school. Please tell your friends to show up if they have questions or concerns. And the one big thing I'll ask of you is if you're having a problem with Clark Middle School, if you have a concern about your child, if you think we've just missed the mark and we need to do something differently, come to your kid's teacher, come to me, come to my admin team, come to Miss Hinger. Ask us first before you go to social media. There's a lot of negativity on social media right now, and it's causing decision makers to be reactive as opposed to proactive. And I think if we can get to a place where schools are able to address concerns as quickly as we can, and our district leaders can really focus on the work of moving us forward, I think we'll have better outcomes altogether. So that's just my plea to you. If we're not doing it, if what we're doing is not working for you, please give us a chance to correct it and fix it before you go posting it to social media or going somewhere else with it. I appreciate y'all. And I'm really proud of y'all's kids this year.
Chris?
Yes.
I don't know how to raise my hand. I'm sorry. Where's that button?
That's all right. Okay. Just go ahead.
Okay. But I do need to know, is it the reactions?
It's, if you go to the participants down at the bottom
Yeah.
and you click it and then you look over to your right, there should be a panel.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Real quick though, I have a lot of donations for the uniform room. I know we're not using it right now, but I've got all this stuff. Can I just drop it off at the school? Are you there all day?
I am. That you'll have to text me or something though, because we don't have a lot of other staff in the building today, and so I'll have to come unlock the doors for you.
I'll get Keith to try to drop it off.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you have my number already?
No. Angie does though. I mean,
I don't. Do I have you in my?
I don't think so. You probably don't want to give me your number.
No, I will. I'll email it to you. Oh no, because you have a different. I don't know what your email is anymore. If you email me, I'll respond with my number.
I emailed you about the piano.
Oh yeah, I'll respond to that one with my number so you can forward it on to Keith so he can get in the building.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Y'all have a great day. Thank you again for everything.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Y'all, I am flabbergasted at the amount of work that you guys are doing, and it's so, I can't say too much, but you know where I am now. It's not the same experience for the virtual kids at home.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
There is power in it. Like, we can absolutely provide education this way. It just does take more work.
Absolutely. Y'all take care, okay?
Thanks, you too.
Bye, Sean.
Bye, Lindy.
I actually had one question, a little bit unrelated. It's about band. Is this an
Sure.
appropriate time to ask that?
Yes.
So Russell Couch is my son, and he was interested. Let's see, he did saxophone last year, and I guess he's in orchestra, and
That's weird.
yeah, he wanted to do the saxophone still, but he said it wasn't a choice on the form, and I said that's probably because it's orchestra, and we were wondering if there's a way that he can continue with band and sax rather than switching to another instrument that's expensive and just a whole nother thing. Is that possible?
I need to check. We placed everybody based on what they requested last year. So
that may have been a misunderstanding on our part. I will email the teacher and we'll go through that way first.
Yeah, if you'll start with Mr. Reevy.
Yes,
then
I plan to do that anyway.
We've been honestly trying not to do a lot of schedule changes just because of the complexity of how scheduling has worked.
Sure,
for
I
a case
understand
like
that.
this, if he was in band last year, learned an instrument, wants to continue with that instrument, I kind of want to make an exception to get him into the band class, and that's an easier shift than some other shifts people are requesting.
Okay, I'll talk to Mr. Reeve. Next on my agenda. I just thought I'd bring it up with you now, but we'll go ahead and go through those protocols and do it that way.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Sandy, Sandy, did you see my message that I can come to the PTA meeting on Tuesday? So if you need me to talk about something specific or need something specific, just send me an email.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I don't know that we're going to go with anything specific unless you feel like there's information that people need. Really just was going to be, another time for people to ask questions because I know everybody's got them. So
I would love for Hinger to be able to highlight the help page of the distance learning website and maybe even talk a little bit about what people have said here in the Google Classroom overwhelming emails. Hinger, are you okay with that? Just so we can say we know it's an issue. It doesn't need to be a question. We know that's a problem that we're solving.
Sure. And I think if you get Batson's little screencast and are able to send it directly to parents and then maybe directly to kids too, that'll help. And if we're addressing an advisement next week too. So every way we can have that conversation, because I do think it's important that they work on that skill of checking their email, checking their Google Classroom.